Hello, everyone. Welcome to Adobe Live. I'm your host, Fabiola Lara, and this is Adobe Spotlight. Today, we're spotlighting motion designer and art director Mathias Lynge in American. In Danish, I'm going to attempt it. Here we go. Lunga.
Well, close enough.
Close
Yeah.
enough. Today, we'll be learning more about his creative process, his approach to art direction and animation projects, and you have a chance to ask all of your questions so he can get to them. I'll be sure that he gets to them while we're here. And a quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to Adobe Live on YouTube so you don't miss a stream. And let me see who's in the chat. Stian, I think that's Nordic. I don't know how to pronounce that. I hope I'm doing a good job. Robert, Keys, thanks so much for being here. Hi, Ray. We have so many people in the chat that are already excited, Mathias. But first thing, why don't you introduce yourself, your work, tell the chat what you're all about.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm a 2D animator, and I work mostly with After Effects, but also hand-drawn animation. And I've always loved drawing since I was a kid, but it's only been for the past 4 or 5 years that I've made it into like a career. And I really just love everything with animation, but especially 2D. And yeah.
Let me see your page. Did you have your page up? You have a ton of tutorials on there. Be sure to check out his Instagram. There's so many cool things. He has the projects themselves and a bunch of tutorials if you want to learn more. But today, what are you going to be showing us, Mathias, in terms of the actual project that we're going to get a little sneak peek on?
So today I thought I would show you actually the first part of my show reel, which is this one. And this is just an intro animation I'm going to be focusing on. So not the stuff, but I have it open here in After Effects.
Yes.
Just show it here. So this is one of my favorite recent projects. And what I really love about it is that it blends my passion for 2D frame by frame animation, but also a lot of vector animation and After Effects going on.
Wow.
Yeah, so
I feel like I look at that and my mind cannot quite comprehend how I would go about making it. So I'm really excited that we have you here today so you can explain your technique, because I'm sure there's a million different ways to do this. But first, before we start going into the project, I want to know, how did you start off how did you get started with animation? It seems like such a lofty thing to get into, and I'm just curious what made you go in that direction.
Yeah, well, for a long time, I thought I was going to be doing something related to film and TV. And I also went to an education here in Denmark that's called Film and Media Studies. And it was pretty cool, and I loved it, but I just slowly found out that it wasn't for me. There was nothing really that I felt like a deep passion for in terms of work. But then on one of the last semesters of the education, I took 6 months and went to California to UC Santa Barbara. And while I was there, I had a course called Introduction to Animation. And
Oh,
it was like really cool old school cell animation class, which were my first taste of that. And we got to work on like different student projects together, and I really got I grew a passion for it at that point. So when I got back to Denmark, I totally changed directions. So I didn't take the masters of that education, and instead I ended up going to another school, which had a class called, or like
a
an
major.
education called a major, thank you, interactive design.
Okay.
And part of that major was to learn about digital animation. So that was where that grew. And then I found After Effects. And yeah, since that, I haven't been using anything else almost.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you didn't end up finishing the other masters that you originally started with?
No.
Oh my gosh. I love hearing when people switch paths, because I feel like that's always kind of a scary time for people, especially in the creative field. But now you are, working in your passion field, and it's gotten you really far. I've already seen some of your work on your portfolio. And I can't wait I mean, I'm shocked. For me, when I learned After Effects, I was like, okay, I'm going to try not to open this program if I can avoid it. And you opened it and you were like all about it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I like everyone else at first, it was like a lot of learning. And it's been since like even today, it's to me, I think I only know about maybe 30% of it or something like that. Because it's just so versatile.
It is,
But
yeah.
for it's just been a lot of like trial and error for me. And also like following YouTube channels like Ben Merritt and Jake Bartlett and people like that who really helpful in like showing how things are done. And
Yeah.
so I think I've just been experimenting like forever, and that's how I got to where I am now.
Wow. Okay. That's great. I feel like we all watch tutorials on YouTube all the time. You're watching this one right now. Now you're doing a tutorial of sorts. So it's nice to see that all come together. I wanted to ask you, after you got really into motion design, what ended up inspiring you to go into 2D versus 3D or anything else? Motion graphics,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
I think because like I've always just loved 2D animation. I've like I said, I used to draw a lot when I was a kid. And watching stuff like The Simpsons when I was young, and like I think the style, like the 2D universe, just spoke to me in a way. I think it also because of the kind of messiness of it, like the not perfect but still full of spirit and like personality. So I think I made a decision like early on, like that was the thing I wanted to do and get better at. And I've always loved Disney movies when I was a kid, and like looking at who the animators were and like finding out about like people like Aaron Blaise and Glenn Keane and people like that.
Just
So I
being a
think,
total nerd, looking everyone up. I've been there. I've done the same thing. I used
yeah,
to like look up the cast of Hey or the animators for Hey Arnold.
yeah.
That was one of my favorite shows. Which one? I know you mentioned Simpsons and Disney movies, but did you have
Mm.
like a favorite cartoon that inspires your work?
I mean, like in more recent years, I think like Ghibli, like all of the Studio Ghibli movies, definitely because I love doing like I also get a lot of inspiration from nature and like going outside and like viewing around, also in like in the city and out in the nature. But I think like the Ghibli universe is just so grounded in like
Yeah.
beautiful nature, and yeah, and there's a lot of focus on beautiful backgrounds and like stuff like that. And so I try to get a little bit of that into my tutorials, which I do these years.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, yeah, Ghibli movies, I love them. When I watch them, they make me so emotional. So I get it. I understand why that inspires you.
Yeah.
But let's get into, After Effects. I want to know, just can you show us real quick the setup of this project and how you organize your files?
Yeah, for sure. So this is like my final export composition. So this is where I usually uh end up with putting on color adjustments, stuff like that. So this is like the end result of everything. Um, but if we delve down, so this is where my full scene is inside here.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's starts getting a bit more chaotic, but
Complex.
complex. Yes, that's the word. Uh, so you can see here if I just pull this up. Whoopsie doopsie. So we got a lot of layers here, or like comps. So the logic here is for me to try to think in like front ground, background, stuff like that, middle ground, and that's the name of these layers. And then I also have stuff like the lizard character, the main character.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so I'm just struggling with this. So here we go. And then you can see over here to the right, I made this 3D displacement of each layer. And you can see I've used a camera here. So that's how I did for this one, like trying to get that 3D feel to it once the camera is moving down in the beginning.
Yeah, do you use that technique a lot, the camera technique?
Yeah, I mean, like I love using Parallax to just add the sense of depth in my animations. So I usually use like a camera or maybe just a null to create the movement of each layer. But I
I would
think
love to see how you actually do that. I feel like that's a technique people are always curious about, or if you could break it down. I know maybe it's,
yeah, I
quite
mean,
complex.
like this is just let me see if I can uh yeah, so basically this is, if you see it from the top, you can see here I've got each layer like separated by distance, and then the camera just makes sure that everything stays in order. Yeah, but usually I'll actually do like a more simple version where I use nulls. So if I just quickly make a new composition, I can just show you what I do. So
Yeah.
if I have like, let's say, oh, this is quite funky. Doesn't matter. So if I have two layers and I want to make sure that that you get the parallax effect, I can do, like, if it's a simple thing, I'll just use position keyframes and make sure that the ones that are supposed to be closer to you are moving faster. So like have a greater distance. And this is very basic, but like, okay, let me just make this
Yeah, like
quick.
when you're in a car.
Exactly. So like watching outside of a car and just watching things go by, like,
Yeah.
and that's just the principle behind it. And you can do that, with position keyframes on the layers. You can also do it by adding a null to master everything, or you can use a camera. And yeah, that's pretty much it
I
for these.
wanted to ask you for the lizard, I'm going to call it the lizard
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
Did you import all of these? Where did you make like the layers, or did you make them within After Effects?
Good question. So this is the lizard comp, and so the lizard character is not made in After Effects at first. At least this is actually made in Adobe Animate.
Cool.
I have this Swift file you can see down here. If I just isolate it, you can see what's going on. So this is the total, like the full lizard, but then I also isolated the eyes just to make them pop with the colors.
Cool.
But it's the same file basically. So, and then the rock, you can see that is made inside of After Effects just by using shape layers. And
Nice.
so
How do
I
you
like
decide when to do which one?
Yeah, I mean, that depends on the project. So I'll always determine, like, in the beginning what kind of style I'm going to use. So for this one, I knew I wanted to do like a mix of a lot of things just to, show off. Um, but like, I think it's definitely what kind of tone and feeling I want to express, and then I'll go from there.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like the prep for animation is such an essential part of getting the actual animation done and done correctly and quickly, as efficiently as you can. So I like
Yeah.
seeing how you're pulling it all off. Going back to like your creative career, I wanted to know what was like the one moment that you decided like, okay, this is actually going to be my entire career. It's not just something that
Hmm.
I'm curious about. Like what was your first commission maybe, or
Yeah.
project that you worked on professionally?
Well, actually, I had an internship back when I was at the old school I was at, where that was right after I came home from California, and I
Were you
worked at
so sad? Were you so sad to come back? Or were you so happy?
a mix, a
A
mix.
mix. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
fair enough.
definitely, yeah. But this place was pretty cool. They made animations and also like stuff for film and TV. But my role was kind of not so animation heavy, unfortunately. It was a big place and they had a lot of things going on. So I ended up doing a lot of SoMe work. And I really wanted to do more animation, and there were a lot of cool animators working there. So I got to do a little bit, but luckily my co-intern, he was trying to get going on his own, and he was out filming music videos and stuff like that. And so he asked me one day if I wanted to join a project where I had to animate for a Danish artist, like doing a full 2D music video.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and to me that was just so awesome because I haven't really done anything freelance before, and also not ever done like a big project like that, only like small 2 second, 3 second animations. So it was kind of like a yeah, like a big project to take on. But
Yeah. Filling
yeah,
in like what, 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes?
yeah, something
That's
like
a
that.
lot of time.
And I think the result, like it's not the best thing I've made for sure, but it was definitely it was a good start for me, and I didn't know it was that bad when I made it, I think. So I mean the artist liked it and we were happy. So yeah.
Hey, that's all that matters. I feel like once you finish with a project, you can take some space and then years later you're like, wait, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it now, but at least you got it
Yeah.
done and it was one of your first longer projects. I have an amazing question here from Robert Wennerberg, which I know he's often in the chat. So hi. He wants to know, what is your favorite studio in Denmark?
Ooh, well, I have one which is very close to my heart because I was also an intern actually only about a year ago, and that's called a 7C studio. So that's 7Cs in a row.
In a row. Okay.
Yeah. And they are like this cool small studio located in a place in Copenhagen that's called Frederiksberg. And they are just awesome people and very, very talented. And they have a lot of 2D animation, but also mixed with 3D. And yeah, they are just you should check those out. Those cool people, for sure.
Awesome. I'm sure everyone will get a ton of inspiration by checking them out. And we have another question here coming in from YouTube. What do you do to practice? And then they
Oh,
have a second part of the question too. How
yeah.
do you choose what to focus on?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I when I make like tutorials, for example, I often like sit down and like have no idea what to make. So I'll often, bring out a sketchbook or something like that and just begin doodling away. And also going outside, like I said, like if I'm taking a walk, I'll often get inspiration and then bring that sketch back and then think of ways to animate it. That's pretty much my process. Yeah. So, and yeah,
Do
practice.
you
I mean,
ever like sketch it like a storyboard?
yeah, for sure. Like if I'm doing like client work, I will usually always have either a storyboard or an animatic. But I think animatics work best for me just because it's when we're talking about like client projects, just to be on the same page with the client that you can feel the pace of it and like how the story flows. So yeah, definitely use animatics a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great question from YouTube. Remember that if you want to drop your questions, if you want Matthias to answer any of them, drop them in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Behance, and I'll make sure that he gets to them. So I was checking out your portfolio, Matthias, and I noticed that you had a lot of different styles. I mean, they're definitely all you, but you had
Yeah.
collage, you had 2D, you had this, which is like, I don't know, 2.5D. How important do you think it is to have one unique style as a motion designer?
That's a good question. I mean, that's something I've been not struggling with, but thinking about a lot recently because I've always had, not being sure about what style I had. Like I knew it was 2D, of course, but like you say, I do a lot of different things, a lot of different styles. And on the one hand, I really like that I have that, I can be like a what do you call it? a chameleon, like just,
Yeah.
also in terms of working, it's just more practical that you can adapt. But on the other hand, it's like I love when I see an artist or like an animator having a very unique style, and it's just so, convincing to watch them do stuff, and authentic. So I think I've been told, at least by people around me, that I have a style, or like they can see, oh, that's Mathias, like even though I don't see it. And I think maybe like the guy we're watching right now, this cartoony looking lizard,
Hmm.
it's probably close to what I would call my style. Yeah, so funny, cartoony, but still like, you know, you can dial it up and down. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Like you can push your style further and lean in, but then some projects,
Exactly.
it's totally fair to like lean back a little bit, depending, I guess,
I
on the
would I would
client.
never like I could never do 3D, I think, or like maybe something totally realistic. That would just not be me. But within a wide space, I would say I can adapt and I can stretch it for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's good to be adaptable. Another thing that I noticed in your portfolios, you have some photo collage animation.
Yeah,
And so I'm wondering, like, when you decide to use which one, is it up to the client? How do you feel about it? Just tell
yeah.
me everything.
Well, I think like I started doing those kind of animation maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And at first it was just I got inspired by, do you know, Blink My Brain, Ariel Costa?
I'm not familiar, but I'm sure we can drop it in the chat maybe.
Yeah. So he's like an awesome animator, and he has this very specific collage style. And I think I watched like a YouTube video of him showing his process and how he breaks down like, in a very like destructive way. He just brings in photos and stuff, and he just makes them, totally takes it apart and puts it back together like Frankenstein, and it's just so awesome and cool looking. And so that inspired me to do like more of these collage type projects. And but then at a certain point, like I got more and more like client requests to do those. And so yeah, it's a mix of beginning mostly doing my own projects and then also suddenly getting client work in that field. Yeah.
That makes sense. And do you find it faster or slower compared to like the project that you're showing us now to use the collage kind of style?
I think like you can get results quite fast. Like you can get like a very specific look quite fast. And but like the if you if I open up a project like that, it would be very messy. Like there would
Right.
be quite quickly you get like 1,000 layers, and like so it's definitely you have to consider that before jumping into it, because it has to be a bit messy, I think, before it looks good with that style.
Yeah,
Um,
and perfecting that I'm sure is really tough to get it to actually look
yeah,
purposeful versus like just kind of sloppy. There's like a fine line there.
exactly. Yeah. So you can quite easily getting to like also boring if you don't like do enough distortion and stretching
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So yeah, it has to be a bit messy.
And what kind of clients prefer, or have you noticed anything in terms of what clients prefer, like uh your illustrative work versus the collage work? Do you notice like a trend there?
Uh, I think like I have a, oh, can you hear me?
Hello?
Oh, okay. Is it I'm just having a slow connection, I think.
I am hearing you. And while Matthias checks his
Oh.
audio, we're here with Mathias Lynge. I got too scared to say it in Danish. Be sure to check him out over at on Instagram. And if you have any questions about animation, motion design, drop them in the chat. We'll be sure that he gets to them. And Matthias, are you back?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Perfect.
So
So
what were you?
I had asked you if you saw a trend between the kind of clients that prefer your illustrative work versus the collage work, because I have a theory in my head, but I want to hear it from you first.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I've gotten requests from people like working in the film industry and more artist-driven clients, which prefer the or like the collage style, definitely. While the more like safe, clean style is usually for like bigger companies. I would say, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That would,
I feel like in illustration, I don't know about motion design. The collage style is used a lot in editorial because it can be done faster and you don't have to draw every single element. So I feel like I see it a lot like when it comes to media organizations when they do like explainers and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
So that's something I've noticed. I wanted to see if I was the only one. But we have a question here coming in from Behance from Stian. I hope I'm saying that right. What's your dream project? Is it a
Oh,
full length movie,
yeah.
an animated series, or maybe something else completely?
That's a good question.
We're manifesting.
Yeah, I think like it's always been a dream for me to work with some of the cool studios out there, like places like Ordinary Folk, Oddfellows, stuff like that. And to work maybe on a what could be like maybe a Super Bowl ad, something like that.
Ooh,
Something big and like
high visibility.
yeah, I think just because those people like they can really flex their animation muscles and that would be awesome to be a part of. Um, Other than that, I mean like I've dabbled with short films, like my own animated short films, and I really like that. And that's probably something I will do more of in the future. But I want to give it the time to be good, like be good enough, not worrying about like my next paycheck and stuff like that. So I feel like that's something that needs a lot of time to prepare and execute. But that would be
Yeah.
good.
That would be cool. We're hoping it happens. I'm sure it will. Another thing I wanted to ask you now that you're a professional animator, I wanted to know what are some of the key principles or practices that helped you become like a professional animator, be at this level, that you would recommend for people just getting started.
Yeah, I mean like very classic thing to recommend in animation, but like the 12 principles of animation is something I've had a lot of use for with and that's something I learned all the way back when I was in California. And also I went out and bought the book, the Disney 12 Old Men Who Wrote It. And so I mean those principles still holds up today, in my opinion. And it's just an easy way to understand a lot of the like especially like physics, what goes into creating a convincing animation. And yeah, what else? I mean, yeah,
Do you have any recommendations for people who are wanting to get started freelancing as an animator?
I mean, definitely, I have used a lot of like both YouTube channels, but also podcasts, stuff like Motion Hatch, especially, which is a British podcast by Haley Akins, and that helped me really much in the beginning because it interviews a lot of people from the industry and talks a lot about the business side of animation and like especially focus on freelancers. So it's just a really helpful resource if you're starting out and like stuff like figuring out how to charge a client, like how do I, set up a day rate, stuff like that. That was really helpful for me in the beginning. And I still listen to it just because it's interesting to hear from people from the industry. So I would definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, I feel like hearing from other people, kind of like we're doing right now, really helps understand like how other people are doing it, what you can adopt as a part of your process. So listen to that
Yeah,
podcast, learn from others, and
do it.
we always learn on Adobe Live, of course. I wanted to also ask you, oh, wait, hold on. We have another question here from Behance. What is the process of getting a project going? Is there a writer involved? Do clients come with you with an idea, or does that come from you? So maybe give us a picture of how what are the different options that clients usually come at you with?
So for me, usually I would, if a client reaches out to me, I would start by asking them if they already have a script for let's say it's an explainer video. Usually the client will have a script prepared and they will have ideas of like what kind of content it's going to be. And then I'll have a varying degree of responsibility for doing the art direction and like figuring out the storyboard, making the animatic. But it always starts with like a script when I do these kinds of projects. And then sometimes the clients are gonna be like, you can do everything. We just want to be sure we hearing the right things, but the visual side is your responsibility. And other times they have a really, they have opinions about what it's gonna look like, and we have to like find a balance or like a shared idea of it.
And do you usually work on your my question? I'm trying to arrange the question in my head. Do you work ever with a person who does just like the visuals and then they hand it off to you to do the animation, or do you prefer to do both?
I do that. Sometimes I'll receive like the illustrations files, usually like a Illustrator file, which is ready to be animated. It's usually not the case. Sometimes if I work with like a studio or like a team, they'll have stuff prepared like that. But usually it's more like I'll also do the illustrations beforehand, and then and animate afterwards. Yeah.
And
I would say
how
9 out of 10 times, yeah.
Oh, 9 out of 10 times. Cool. Because I feel like that is really fun to be able to bring your own characters to life versus
Sure.
other people's. So I can see that. Do you, when you create characters or scenes, do you kind of how do you present these characters to the client?
Yeah.
Because in my experience freelancing, the client always picks the worst one.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how it goes on your end.
I mean, I can maybe show you something I made for DoorDash a while ago on my website. So I'll just open that just a sec. So this project right here, can you see this one?
Yes.
So this was a project that I made for DoorDash last December. And so they came to me with a jingle. They had like a song that I had to.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool project promoting DoorDash for the holiday. And so they had an idea of what it was going to be about, but they didn't know, like it was up to me to define like what's the characters going to look like. And then I made these style frames. And before this is not on my website, but I also made like just quick sketches to get like zoom in like on what they wanted to do. But this is like the style we ended up using. And so yeah, so this is my design like of the characters, and they are pretty much the same in the video, more or less. Oh, here we go. Here's like two variations.
Two options.
Yeah. And so that's usually how my process is, like going in, like giving them a few options, not like sending like 20 different, but maybe 2 or 3, just to be clear about like, let's move on. Let's have it like a productive process.
I love seeing this. I feel like this is, what happens before you even start opening After Effects. And I'm just always so curious to see how, everything gets made. Have you ever had a time where you designed a character that you didn't end up liking in the end?
Oh, that's a good question. I
Oh, wait,
mean,
maybe you can't say because you don't want to drag the client.
no, but like
Okay.
sometimes you just do it, maybe not just even characters, but just if you're working with the same thing over and over again, that could also be like a song. For instance, this jingle, it's pretty good, but I've been listening to it maybe like 10,000 times while working on it.
You kind
And
of get fed up.
yeah, so likewise with, designing a character, if you have to use it over and over again, if you have to rig a character in After Effects and then, make it walk this way and that way and up and down, like you can get kind of tired of it. But I don't think I have like one I like hated or like it didn't I like disliked. Like
It's a strong emotion.
yeah,
But yeah, I like to know that how people really feel halfway, or when it's over,
yeah.
when you go into it versus when it's over. Now, we have an amazing question here from YouTube. What advice would you give to your younger self, and what advice would you give to beginners when it comes to 2D animation?
Okay, yeah. Younger self. Uh, Probably skip the whole film education stuff and go straight to animation because that's what you really like and you're just too young to realize it. That would be good. New-
That would be nice. You'd save yourself some time.
yeah. I mean, I really like what I'm doing, so it could be nice just to have some, spend some more time doing that beforehand. But I'm really happy where I am. So I mean, it happened the way it used like it had to happen. So
Mhm, mhm.
um, but the other question was for new animators.
Yeah, advice for new 2D animators.
Let's see. So I think like being like keep experimenting with stuff and not like think like you only have to do one thing, even that if that's the thing you like right now. Try to push yourself and also like not be too hard on yourself. Like I think me and a lot of people I know are like sometimes struggling with like imposter syndrome or like thinking like that my work is not as good as so many other people's are. And I think you just have to silence that voice inside your head because first of all, it doesn't matter, but also you're not the best judge of your own work always. Like, and sometimes you just have to create a lot to get to that level. So if you're already like criticizing yourself from the start, it's gonna be a long journey. So yeah,
Definitely. Ooh, I agree with that because in order to get better, you have to put in the time. And if you hold yourself up there with imposter syndrome and self-criticism, you'll never get there. So I definitely agree with that. And I hope that helps you out if you're listening and you want to get into 2D animation. Now, Matthias, I want to go back to our After Effects file. And
yeah,
can you show us just like a workflow that you often do, or a tip or a trick that you tend to do that you used for this
yeah,
project? That way people
yeah,
can get a little bit of the technical side.
yeah.
And while
I
we
mean,
keep going here.
we can start out with the lizard here. I think there's some pretty interesting stuff.
Yes.
So one thing, like I said, this is imported from Animate, but I've done a lot of extra stuff inside After Effects to this layer just to make it look better, make it pop. So I'm a huge fan of using layer styles, which if you see my tutorials, I use that all the time. So that is when you, for example, this lizard layer right here, if I go inside this one, and you can see down here, I have some layer styles on it.
Mhm.
So right now I have two different ones. The first one is inner shadow. And if I just, let me just remove the background.
This is a great one to show because we have a question here from Harsha Ravi asking what your favorite feature is. So I feel like if you use this often, it's probably
Yeah,
one of your favorite features.
definitely. So it's a bit, let me just see if I can change the background. Yeah, just to make it more clear what I'm doing.
Okay.
Um, so as you can see, we have this highlight going on,
Mhm.
this light hitting the lizard, and that's actually in the shadow. So I've flipped it, so to speak. Usually when you put this on, it's gonna be black
Okay.
and to multiply, I think. So if you change it to a light color and you change it the blend mode to overlay or screen, you
Okay.
can get this light effect, and then you can just determine how much you want by dialing up the opacity, and also looking at the distance to see how much light you want to affect.
Ooh,
But you
okay.
can't go, if you go too far, it will look kind of strange.
Right.
So yeah, but if you just want that rim light effect, you can use this.
That's
And
handy.
the other thing I have is gradient overlay, and that's something I've been using more and more lately, just to give the whole layer just this soft gradient look. And it's basically just like using a gradient fill, but you can go in and change stuff pretty quickly by using layer style. So if I just press this, you can see this is how it looked without
Oh,
it, and also without the. So this is the original layer, and you can see how much effect it has to put these effects on.
yeah.
And
That's
that's just
pretty
a quick
big, pretty
fix.
major transformation there.
Yeah, and I've used the same for the stone. So you can see here, it also has this rim light effect going on.
Yeah.
And I think it just gives this nice looking effect in the end. And that's just, you can do that pretty quickly. You don't have to draw everything by hand like I did with the original animation. Yeah, so that's one tip for sure.
That's a great one. I feel like, yeah, everyone is saying how much depth it gives it. I feel like it makes it look cohesive, right? Like one in the entire composition. It feels like they're together.
Yeah,
So that's great. I love that tip.
for sure. Yeah. I also
Is
have another one if you want.
yes, show us, show us.
So I mean, I this is the little car you see in the beginning, like in the distance. So this is the
Okay,
one
yes, yes.
I've used, and I've sort of tried to make it look like it's hand drawn frame by frame. But
Yeah.
this is actually just shape layers, like you can see here.
Oh, cool.
Zoom in. So these are
So this is
individual.
an example of one that you built right in After Effects.
Yeah, exactly. But you can see I can go in and change the path keyframes. So if you look down in the timeline, you can see this is for each new keyframe, it's going to change the look.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and this is kind of hard to do just on the fly. So for this one, I also used a reference. I did this quick rough animation in Adobe Animate first, as you can see here,
Cool.
and not spending too much time on it, just to get the right feel of the cow being like squished a little,
Mm-hmm.
and I use that to do these shape layers afterwards.
Oh, I
So
love seeing how that was built. Do you often do that, where you like sketch out the animation first?
yeah, I mean, like I do a lot of things, like depending on what project it is. So I think this can be quite tiresome to do with bigger stuff. So
Yeah.
this works fine because it's just a small car and it's only for like 3 seconds.
Hmm.
So I like to use path keyframes a lot. But usually I would do more like small tweaking, not like major objects turning in 3D. It can be quite a lot to do it this way instead of just drawing it. So sometimes it's easier just to draw it, and sometimes I think it's better this way. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like I would rather draw this one, but I
Yeah.
understand why you built it in here. How long did this entire animation take you? Because how long is it? It's not very long,
No, I think
the entire composition,
it's only about like, yeah, 7 seconds. I
but a
think
lot happens. A lot happens.
a lot, yeah. So I think for the frame by frame animation, I used a couple of days on that, like the lizard. And then putting it all together, also a couple of days. I think I used less than a week on it. Uh, but I was having a lot of fun. It was not like I had a timer on and working from morning to evening on this. It was
Right,
just,
right.
a
Well,
passion project.
yeah, I feel like when it's a passion project, you're happy to put in the time and really like sit with it and try and make it, as good as it can be.
For
But
sure.
we also have a question here. I think it's from YouTube. Oh, these two questions here. Let's start with this one. Oh, when it comes to explainer videos, how long does the creation process last? So similar
Yeah.
question, but
Yeah. I mean, like it's also, a process that's very much, in concert with the client. So it depends on, a lot of things, but usually I divide it into three parts. So you have the initial one where you do either a storyboard or the animatic, and that could be maybe 2 or 3 days, something like that, to get the feedback, to do corrections, stuff like that. And then it's the main part of the animation work. And depending on like the size and like the details, it can vary a lot.
Yeah. Well,
But
this takes me to the other question. I think this is going where you're headed.
yeah,
Clients often request multiple design variations. What is the best approach to managing this while maintaining efficiency and meeting expectations? So you were saying, it depends on what the client demands, how maybe detailed it is, but how do you usually how do you keep it realistic, right? How do you manage
yeah,
scope without it getting crazy?
yeah. That's a good question. I mean, like I've learned the hard way that you have to be very clear upfront, like communicating clearly what the terms of the project are with the client, and being like totally on the same page before I even, open After Effects, because it's just it can really easy get out of out of whack. And so I always start by determining like the scope of it, and like usually I'll have like X amount of correction rounds with the client. So I'll say beforehand, like this is this size of project. So I determine like it's gonna be around 3 rounds of corrections. And this is where you can say what you want changed. But if you extend it beyond that, it's gonna be outside of our scope, and then other, rules apply.
Right.
So I think like being very clear upfront about that helps a lot.
Have you
And then
ever had a client just be like, oh, let's add this one thing real quick, this little thing, but it's actually a
yeah,
very complicated thing to animate?
yeah. I mean, I once had like a nightmare client where this was early in my career, but like so he wanted to do like a explainer for his product, and it was a one-man company. And so he had these grand ideas of what it was going to be. And I showed him what I wanted to make. Like I made actually like style frame and an animatic, I think. And he was like, yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And then I made it and I showed it to him. And he was like, no, 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 this is not at all what I want. I wanted it to be 3D. And so I'm not a
Wow.
3D animator. And he sent me like, Hollywood stuff like to do instead
Like
of this
Pixar.
simple. Yeah. So, I mean, like that's the worst experience I've had,
What did
but
you do in that case? Did you have to be like, goodbye or
pretty much, yeah.
refer to a
I
friend?
I said to him, I think I wrote something like, okay, this is not what we agreed. We can do it, we can do these things, but if not, I'm out. And then he didn't reply. So
Wow. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Well, it happens to everyone. I've been there. I'm sure tons of people watching have been there. But I want to give a little reminder to the chat. We have under 10 minutes left. If you have any questions, bring them on over, whether you're watching on YouTube or watching on Behance. I want to make sure you get your questions answered. In the meantime, I have a question for you because you were saying that this nightmare client, you called
Yeah.
it a nightmare client, so I'm going to call it, uh, was just one person. Do you prefer working with large teams, right?
Mm.
Or do you prefer working on a smaller team?
I I would like if I had to choose, I would say larger teams, because my experience is like the larger the team, the more of like effective communication and workflow and everything is just more professional. And also if this is let's say it's a company or brand who knows about animation, like they know about my process, and that definitely helps. And what can often happen if you're doing work for like smaller clients is that they never heard of what, they have no idea what you're doing. They're not creatives and they don't know
Yeah.
anyone who is. So they have very different ideas of what the project is going to be like the process, how long it's going to take, stuff like that. But I wouldn't say it's like black and white. You can also find excellent clients who are like solo entrepreneurs, stuff like that. I've had a lot of those for sure.
I can see that it varies, but yeah, it's always nice when you get to work with someone who understands, the process of working with an animator versus like the first time ever working with an animator.
For sure, yeah.
And we have this really good question here from YouTube. Do you ever find yourself in a creative block? And if so, how do you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I do. But I think like I usually just like accept it if I can, like if I have to work, I have to push for it. Like if then it's gonna
True.
be something less to my taste, but I'm gonna make it. But if it's more like in terms of doing like let's say a tutorial or passion animation, uh I'll often like have periods where I'm just not getting any inspiration, and I try to just accept it. Uh, but there are ways you can try to, stimulate your creativity and like start doodling or, watching, I always look at stuff at Pinterest to get going, just to see what other has done, not because I want to, steal an idea, but just to see, aspects of other work.
Yeah.
That can often like spark something in me, I think.
Do you ever put on like your favorite animated movie or something? You're like, I need to rewatch
Yeah,
this.
I do. I especially Ghibli Studios. I love Porco Rosso. Um,
Put it in the chat,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah. So one of the I think it's a less popular one. It's not like the top three for most people, but it's just the style of it is so my kind of animation. And that one actually inspired me a lot to do a short film I did last year, um, which came after a period of, creative block for sure. So I would say that was a good example of getting out of it by another piece, and that was a Ghibli movie. Yeah,
And it's always nice to take a break and, sit back and put on your favorite movie as part of your creative block remedy. So I understand that. Now, I think we only have a few minutes left, but I was wondering if there are any go-to After Effects shortcuts that you always use as a last little thing for everyone watching the stream.
I mean, let's think about it. Yeah, I mean, you can do like I always put on like for the last finishing touches, I usually put on an adjustment layer just to get the final if I want some grain or some blur or some glow, something like that. That's usually what I do. I can show you here. I don't think I have so much of this one in particular, but
Oh, there we
you
go.
see
Yeah.
the idea with a
Mhm.
adjustment layer added in the end. And you can see in here, okay, this is just to change the colors, but that can also be just nice to, in the final moment, just to tweak a little bit. But let's say I want to add, let me just see where I got this is the
This is
wrong,
just one last thing for everyone watching before we wrap up here.
I'll be very quick. So glow effect, that's a good one.
Oh, okay.
You can put
There
this
it
on.
is. Yeah.
Let's see, yeah. Whoa, yeah. So this has to be adjusted, but you can definitely play around with this just to get
Oh,
this
cool. The
nice little
intensity.
glow. Yeah. If you want to add just a little bit extra, that's one trick. Yeah.
Wow, that was a really cool one. Thanks so much for showing us that effect, Matthias. Thanks for being here. I want to say thanks to the chat and everyone who dropped all of their questions. We learned so much about your work, your creative journey, and some tips and tricks on Adobe After Effects. Now, before you go anywhere, make sure to follow Matthias on Instagram. It's already linked in the chat, so you can see more of his amazing tutorials, and go follow him on LinkedIn. I'll drop that in the chat in a second. If you want to follow him, he posts a lot of really amazing animation industry posts over there. And don't go anywhere, because up next, you'll learn how to create seasonal title cards in Adobe Premiere with Adobe veteran Sin Lagos. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your time, Mathias, and I'll see you next
Thank
time.
you. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.